Hello guys, welcome back to another video. As always, I am so excited to have you guys here, and if you're new here, hello, welcome. My name's Claire. I'm a naturopathic doctor and I like sharing healthy meal ideas, inspiration. Of course, I know that there is so much more to health than just food, but if you are looking to improve your health, nutrition is a great place to start. And I always just preach the importance of a whole food based diet that is micronutrient rich, high in protein and fiber, polyphenols, lots of antioxidants, a good variety of plants, because we know that that is really important to the gut microbiome, but also that we're sourcing our food well, we're eating seasonally and locally when we can, but also that we are eating foods and creating meals that we love, because that is also very important. So starting off this week, I just made one of my favorite breakfasts, which is sourdough rye that I get from a local bakery. I top it off with some organic cottage cheese and avocado that I mix together, some smoked salmon that I get from a local fish market by my house, and then some dried dill. Also, figs have been in season and I have been loving those, so of course I had a few figs on the side as well. After that, I had my coffee with some cashew milk. My favorite brand is Elmhurst because they just use cashews and water in their milks. It's really great. And then for lunch, I got started on a little bit of prepping for the week. So whenever I saute up veggies, I like to do a big batch and then I always have leftovers for later. So I started by sauteing some onions and red peppers. I love doing this combo because onions are part of the allium family, so they are so great for feeding the gut bacteria. Really, any of those allium vegetables like onions, garlic, leeks, they're really rich in an undigestible fiber, so they're really good for promoting that friendly bacteria within the gut. And then red peppers are really high in vitamin C, really important for hormonal health, for the immune system, for the stress response, for overall health, for antioxidant support, and also for making collagen. So I sauteed those up, and then you guys know I love my mushrooms. I had some oyster mushrooms and some shiitake mushrooms, so I added those in. I always add a little bit of salt as well. It really helps to draw out the moisture. And then just before they're done cooking, I add a little bit of garlic powder and dried parsley. Just I find that if I add it too early, it tends to burn. And then I set about half the mix aside to save for another time, and then I added in a few eggs. I also added in a little bit more of the cottage cheese, again just to bump up the protein. And then I've talked about these before, but I really like the Ezekiel sprouted tortillas. I like them for a few reasons. They don't have any oils in them. A lot of the store-bought tortillas, even the whole wheat ones, have seed oils in them and just weird oils that you don't necessarily want in your food. They're also made with all whole grains, which is really nice, and they're all organic and glyphosate free, which is pretty important when it comes to buying grains. I also like that they use a wide variety of whole grains. It really helps with that plant diversity that I talked about at the start, and they even have some lentils in there as well, so a good way to get in some beans and legumes. Of course, I added some mashed avocado on the side, and I really just like this meal. It's a really easy and convenient way to get over 25 grams of protein and 10 grams of fiber. And then in the late afternoon, I actually met up with a friend for juice, so I always get the carrot and beet juice, and it was very delicious. Now, moving on to dinner, one of my favorite things to do in the fall is at the start of the week, I will make a big batch of roasted vegetables. It's just really convenient to have on hand, plus it's delicious and it's a good way to use up that seasonal produce. And you can use at least a couple different squashes and a couple different vegetables, and it again really helps to increase that plant diversity without making a bunch of different meals. So one of my favorite squashes to use is a honey nut squash. It is like a butternut squash, but a million times better. I actually don't like butternut squashes. I know they are the most common types of squashes. There's just so many other squashes I think are better. So I started with a honey nut squash, and then I also love a delicata squash, so I cut some of that up as well. And one of my favorite fall vegetables is parsnips, so of course I chopped up a few parsnips, and you can really use whatever vegetables you like. I know some of the other vegetables that are in season right now are things like Brussels sprouts, cabbage, beets, broccoli, kale, and cauliflower. So use what vegetables you enjoy, what is available to you. You can go to your local farmer's market and see what they have available. We went to the farmer's market over the weekend and they had these beautiful carrots, so of course I added some of those as well. Really, with roasting vegetables, I always just try and pick ones that will roast about the same time. It's a pretty safe bet that most root vegetables and squashes will cook at about the same rate. If you're cooking something softer, maybe like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, or kale, oil. I tend to add those in maybe halfway through because if I add them in too early, they'll burn. But you get the hang of it. Once you cook enough, you kind of figure out how long different things take to cook. I also forgot I had a little piece of purple sweet potato, so I added that in as well. Again, so good. That deep purple color is so great for us. If you don't have access to purple sweet potatoes, you could also use beets. Beets are amazing and they're great for the liver as well. And then for seasoning, I do like to keep it pretty simple so I can mix and match and use them in different meals. So I just did some avocado oil, salt, Ceylon cinnamon, and cumin. I always use Ceylon cinnamon over cassava. Ceylon cinnamon is the true cinnamon, so it has more of those health benefits. And I just gave those a toss. And then you guys know I never really time how long I roast these for. I will just pop them in the oven between 375 and 425, and I'll just periodically poke them and take them out when they are golden on the outside and soft on the inside. While my vegetables were roasting, I just prepped some chicken thighs. I always make up extra just so I have lots of leftovers for the week. And like the roasted vegetables, I try and keep the seasoning pretty simple so that I can mix and match with different meals throughout the week. Here, I just did some salt, garlic powder, and dried parsley. And then for dinner, I just had some of the roasted squash and roasted vegetables, some of the chicken, and then for some gut health, I also added some sauerkraut on the side. Of course, I also added some tahini just for some healthy fat, magnesium, and because it's delicious. And that was my dinner. And then over the weekend, I did make some pumpkin loaf. I made it with some oat flour, and I basically used the same recipe I used for my banana bread, but I just replaced the mashed bananas with pumpkin puree. So I will link the video that my banana bread recipe is in, and then you can just replace the bananas with pumpkin puree. And then later in the evening, I did a little bit of prep for the next day. So I made some tea to just steep overnight so I could have iced tea the next day. And then I also soft boiled some eggs. I like to boil these for 8 minutes, and I just find they make the perfect soft boiled egg. And then on Tuesdays, you guys know I go into the clinic pretty early, so I always bring the same breakfast. I will always do 3 soft boiled eggs, sprouts, avocado, and then whatever fruit I have on hand. Here, I did a few of the figs, and then I also took my coffee with me. And then you guys know I get back from clinic in the early afternoon, so I always want something pretty quick and easy. So here I just warmed up some of the leftovers that I had from the night before, some of the leftover chicken and roasted vegetables. I always get asked where my little black pan is from. It's by the brand Extrema. I will link it down below. I love it because it is 100% ceramic. And then I just made a really quick tahini sauce with some water, tahini, mustard, maple syrup, salt. I just eyeballed all the ingredients and kind of tasted it as I went. And that was a very quick and easy lunch. And if you guys watched my What I Eat in a Week a few videos back, I mentioned that I got an Instant Pot. And one of the main reasons why I bought it was because I wanted to make bone broth. You can definitely make bone broth without a Instant Pot. It just takes a while, and I'm not really comfortable leaving my stovetop on for hours at a time. So I really wanted to get an Instant Pot. Now I did it with roasted bones this time. I'm gonna try it with raw bones. To be honest, it didn't turn out as well as I would like. It didn't get as jiggly and gelatinized as I would like. So I'm still playing around with the recipe. I will let you guys know when I have a final recipe with cooking instructions and time and setting in the Instant Pot and all of those kind of things. But yeah, bone broth is definitely something I'm trying to include in my diet more, especially now that we're moving into the cooler months. It's a great source of collagen. It's good for your gut health. It's good for your immune system. It's really high in a lot of the specific amino acids that are important for supporting a good, healthy gut lining. And then I just added in a bunch of different flavorings and aromatics. I did carrots, celery, onion, ginger, and some bay leaves. And then I just added in a bunch of filtered water, and I pressure cooked it for about an hour and a half. While my bone broth was cooking, I got started on dinner. So I just made up some Japanese sweet potatoes. I sliced up my sweet potatoes and then seasoned them with Ceylon cinnamon, salt, and avocado oil. And then, like I said, I've been loving parsnips. So I also made some parsnips with some garlic garlic powder, avocado oil, and salt. And then I just had some grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef from the butcher store. So I made a few mini patties. I really like to smash mine down and get them nice and flat and crispy. I just season those with a little bit of salt and pepper. And then you guys know I have been loving my little sweet potato burger buns. So I just took out some of the sweet potatoes, added my burger on top, and then put a little top bun. I had some parsnip fries, and of course I added some avocado just for some extra fiber, some extra micronutrients. This has been one of my favorite dinners. It's so easy and convenient to make. It's perfect for one person because I live alone, and that was my dinner. And then at this point, my bone broth was finished, so I just strained that and let it cool overnight. Like I said, it didn't gelatinize and get jiggly as much as I would like. Even if it doesn't solidify, it still has the collagen, the amino acids, the minerals, but I'm gonna keep playing around with the recipe and see if I can get a really good recipe. I will say it was very delicious, so that's good. And then I had a piece of pumpkin bread with peanut butter for dessert. So on Wednesday, I just had the a quesadilla again for breakfast, and then for lunch, I just warmed up some more of the leftover roasted vegetables, roasted squash, and chicken. I topped it off with some more of my tahini sauce, and that was my breakfast and my lunch. I also had a few bites of sauerkraut on the side just for some extra probiotics. I learned early on in my health journey that just sticking to staple meals made eating healthy a lot easier. So I really don't shy away from repeating meals, especially throughout the week and living alone. It's just a lot easier. Moving on to dinner, I did have a bunch of mushrooms to use up. Mushrooms are one of my favorite vegetables. Here, I think this is a mix of cremini and shiitake mushrooms. I love shiitake mushrooms. They are super nutrient dense. They're really high in choline, so a great addition to the diet. So I just started by sauteing those up, and then I also boiled some pasta. This is a pasta that I really like. It's a quinoa and brown rice pasta. And although my diet is primarily made up of whole foods, I still include minimally processed foods like this brown rice pasta, sourdough bread, and the tomato sauce that you guys are gonna see. I really just make an effort to make sure that most of my food is whole food, and then I can include small amounts of these minimally processed foods while keeping ultra processed foods out of the diet. So once my mushrooms are done cooking, I just pushed those to the side and added some ground beef, and then I added a few more seasonings. I think I did garlic, basil, thyme, and parsley and oregano, and I just gave that a good saute. And then for a pasta sauce, I just really like this one that I get at the health food store. It's all organic, and the oil in it is extra virgin olive oil. So I think I ended up using about 3/4 of the jar. I think I also added some tomato paste. I just didn't show it, but I just gave that a toss, added my pasta, and honestly, this was such a delicious dinner. And you've got lots of fiber from the brown rice pasta and the veggies. You could also add in some green peas or frozen veggies. You've got lots of protein from the ground beef. And then I had some Parmesan in the fridge, so I just added some of that on top. So on Thursday, I kept my breakfast pretty classic. I just fried up some eggs with parsley and salt. I mixed some avocado and cottage cheese, toasted up some sourdough bread, and topped it off with some sprouts. And I also love to put some raw honey on my sourdough. This is honestly one of my favorite fall breakfasts, and I love when my yolk is nice and runny. It's also great for preserving nutrients. But that was just a very cozy and comforting breakfast. And then I made a coffee after breakfast. So on Thursday, I got an early start to lunch by prepping some tempeh and squash. I just seasoned my tempeh with tamari, garlic powder, and maple syrup. I gave it a good shake, and then I let it sit in the fridge for about 45 minutes to an hour. I love including tempeh in my diet. It's a great plant-based source of protein. It's also super high in fiber, and I really aim to get about 30 grams of fiber per day. And tempeh is definitely something that helps me reach that goal. It's also fermented, so it's a little bit easier to digest, and it's a lot easier on the wallet than some of the animal-based sources of protein that I like to include. And then I also love buttercup squash. Again, one of my favorite squashes, and it's really great this time of year. So I just chopped a bunch of that up, seasoned it with some Ceylon cinnamon, avocado oil, and salt, and then I roasted that in the oven. And I roasted that while the tempeh was marinating, and then once the squash was done, I just roasted the tempeh on the same pan. And then one of my favorite ways to transition into fall with my salads is to just add more roasted vegetables to my salads. So here I added some of the roasted squash, I added the tempeh, of course I added some avocado, I also added some sauerkraut. I think I ended also adding some pumpkin seeds as well. Of course I always add parsley. And then for your dressing, I just did extra virgin olive oil and balsamic vinegar and some salt and pepper. And I ended up going into the clinic that day, so I took my salad with me to go. Now, I always store all my food in glass containers. This really helps to decrease my exposure to toxins and microplastics. The downside to this is when you drop a container, it will break. So that was a less than ideal way to start my day. I thankfully did not drop my eggs. That would have been worse. For breakfast, I just ended up taking 3 of my soft boiled eggs. And then I did end up dropping the container that my sprouts were being stored in. So I just took some avocado and then I took some more of the leftover squash just for kind of my veggie side. And yeah, that was my breakfast. Of course, I also took my coffee with me. And then Friday's lunch was a little bit random, but I'm always just trying to clear out my fridge at the end of the week. So I just ended up having more of the squash, tempeh, I had some sauerkraut, and then of course I topped it off with some tahini. And then, okay, probably my favorite meal of the entire week was my dinner on Friday. Since it's been fall, I've been telling my boyfriend that I really want to make chicken soup. So we made chicken soup, and of course I had the chicken bone broth. So I will link the original recipe because a lot of you guys on Instagram were asking me about the recipe for this. I would say that I followed the recipe to about 80%. You guys know I'm not very good at following recipes. I think the original recipe in it had like frozen peas, and I knew that we were going to have leftovers, and I hate having frozen peas or peas in a leftover recipe because I find they get overcooked when you go to reheat them. Also, I don't own teaspoons to measure stuff, so I couldn't measure any of the spices. I eyeballed everything. That is just my kitchen. Like, I don't own I own measuring cups, but not measuring spoons because I just find that I don't use them. So I did reserve some of the fat from the bone broth when I made it. So I used that as the cooking fat, and I think that it did add a little bit more flavor. And then I just cooked off all of my aromatics. I think that I should have added in the onions at the start, but I didn't do that. So I also added in a bunch of garlic. I tend to add this a little bit later because, like I said, I find if I add garlic too early, it tends to burn. And then I added all my spices. Like I said, I didn't measure anything else. Also, it calls for poultry seasoning, and I didn't have that. So I just swapped it out with a bunch of different fall spices that I like, but you can totally use poultry seasoning like the original recipe calls for. The original recipe also didn't call for ginger, but I had a bunch of fresh ginger that I wanted to use up. So I added that as well. And the original recipe called for, I think, 1.2 or 1.5 pounds of chicken breast. My boyfriend said that that was not going to be enough. So we added 2 pounds. So again, just a little bit more, but really that's the beauty of cooking is that you can really play around with the ingredients and the measurements and just see what works for you. And I ended up using most of the bone broth that I had made earlier in the week. And then I had a bunch of fresh thyme in the fridge that I wanted to use up. So I added that as well. And the recipe did call for coconut milk. And I was a little bit skeptical because I'm not a huge coconut milk fan, but this definitely made it really delicious. My boyfriend said it turned out to be more of a curry, but I definitely really enjoyed the coconut milk addition. And I just put the lid on and let that cook for about 25 minutes just until the chicken was cooked all the way through. And I have seen so many people on Instagram and on YouTube do the chicken shredding trick with the stand mixer. Now, I don't own a stand mixer. If you don't have one, a boyfriend works great as a replacement. And honestly, this was such a great trick because it made the chicken so easy to shred and it just made the perfect little pieces. I ended up seasoning this at the end. I was adding salt as I was cooking it, but right at the end, I tasted it, just added a little bit more salt and pepper. I also had a bunch of fresh parsley, so I added some of that as well. And I ended up having 2 bowls of the soup. We also had some sourdough baguette on the side. And of course, I had some pumpkin bread and peanut butter for dessert. And then you guys know I never really film on the weekends, but I always like to include some clips. We always like to do big veggie scrambles with a bunch of shiitake mushrooms and avocado toast. And then this was filmed the weekend after my birthday. So my boyfriend treated me to a nice dinner out. Honestly, probably the best part of this dinner was the steak tartare. It was absolutely delicious. Every time I go to the restaurant, if they have octopus on the menu, I have to get it because it's my favorite. Also, the charred broccoli here was really, really good. And of course, I had to get some desserts because it was my birthday. And yeah, that does bring us to the end of the video. As always, I hope you guys got some meal ideas, some inspiration. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are not subscribed, make sure to subscribe. We would love to have you here each week. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!